From JusttheNews.com. Pennsylvania voters describe irregularities in mail-in absentee ballot process. Voters received mail-in ballots when they didn't request them. Some had to cast provisional ballots. By Daniel Payne and Christine Dolan. Published November 18th, 2020, 8:27 a.m. The U.S. saw record numbers of mail-in votes cast in the 2020 election, driven largely by voter concerns that crowded polling places and long lines could act as major spreading centers for COVID-19. Activists and public officials in the months leading up to the November 3rd election launched major informational campaigns and voting drives to help as many people as possible vote via mail. A reported 65 million ballots were cast by mail in the 2020 election, far outstripping earlier years. Along with that major shift in voting methods came the predictable headaches associated with moving a huge percentage of voters over to voting by mail, including numerous reports of voters receiving multiple mail in ballots, in some cases, even when none were requested, as well as voters not receiving requested ballots in time for the election. Voting irregularities in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania, where Joe Biden leads President Trump by just over 1%, have reportedly been widespread. Matt Brainerd, former Trump campaign director of data and strategy and presently the leader of the Voter Integrity Project, reported this week and confirmed to Just the News on Tuesday that the Voter Integrity Project had reached hundreds of voters who experienced issues with their mail in ballots. Quote, among 1,706 respondents we reached, whom the state said were sent an absentee ballot, 556 said they never requested it, Brainerd said this week. And of the 1,137 who did request the ballot, 453 said they mailed back, yet the state did not receive or count them, he added. It's still in the sealed envelope. In interviews with Just the News, individual voters have reported experiencing multiple irregularities in the state's mail-in ballot process, including receiving mail ballots when they didn't request them, and in some cases, being required to vote with provisional ballots when showing up at polling stations. Among the voters who found themselves in the midst of the widespread confusion was Corey Kunkel, a 45-year-old voter near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Quote, for the primary election when COVID started, I had requested a mail-in ballot, Kunkel told Just the News. I didn't know how bad it was going to be. I didn't know if the polls were going to be open. Pennsylvania allows voters to sign up for mail-in voting for a general election when they sign up to vote in a primary. Kunkel, however, said he never asked for a general election mail-in ballot, yet he still received one anyway. When Kunkel showed up at his voting station, he was not allowed to vote on the machine and was told he had to file a provisional vote. Kunkel provided Just the News with personal information to check his mail-in voting status on the Pennsylvania state website. That website lists his ballot status as, quote, pending. Timothy Sirk, who lives in York County, Pennsylvania, also said he received a mail-in ballot he never requested. On election day, he went to his polling center and he was told he was on the rolls as a mail-in voter. He was subsequently directed to vote with a provisional ballot. I want to know what happened here, Sirk told Just the News. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican as long as the votes are counted fairly. Some Pennsylvania voters who spoke to Just the News said they applied for mail-in votes and sent them in, but when they checked online to see if their votes were counted, they were shocked 2 weeks later that their vote is still pending. Diane Doyle, her husband, and daughter chose to vote by mail in the general election, and she mailed all 3 ballots on October 12th. Her husband and daughter's votes were processed on October 26th, but Diane's vote is still, quote, pending as of November 16th. Nicholas Boutin, who lives in Philadelphia, requested a mail in ballot for the general election but subsequently received 2 ballots. He eventually elected to vote in person where he was required to do so by provisional ballot. Many voters who showed up had never requested mail in ballots. Linda Ebert told Just the News that she and her son have been working the polls in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, for around 10 to 15 years. They had previously been registered Democrats, but 5 years ago they changed their party registration to Republican. This year, Linda was a minority inspector at the polls, and her son served as an election judge. They did not request mail in ballots, but still received them in the mail. Ebert, who claimed that the mismailed ballots constituted fraud, said, quote, "I want those who requested our mail-in ballots and mailed them to us to be prosecuted." Ebert, who is 77, worked the polls from 5:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. She said she witnessed numerous voters with similar experiences throughout the day. Quote, "Voters were showing up very confused because many of them received mail in ballots and they too had never requested them," she said. Ebert said she marked them void and allowed the voters to cast their votes. Robert Wolf, who lives near Pittsburgh, said he received 2 mail-in ballots that he never requested. He threw them away and showed up at his polling center and was told he had to vote provisionally because he was on the rolls as a mail-in voter. "I told them that that was nonsense and that I never requested a mail-in vote," Wolf told Just the News. "I'm checking to see if my vote was counted, and it still reads pending." The Pennsylvania Secretary of State's office did not respond to a query asking what the status of pending signifies for a mail-in vote in the state system. Douglas Woods, who lives in the northeast section of Philadelphia, said he requested a mail-in for the Pennsylvania primary but never requested one for the general election. Nevertheless, he received one. He told Just the News he always intended to vote in person for the general election. When he arrived at his voting center with the mail-in ballot, the election official marked it spoiled, and he was told he had to vote provisionally and was not allowed to vote in the booth. Quote, "My voting rights have been violated," says Woods. "I keep looking online to see if my vote has been counted. All it tells me is that it has not been found and to look back 3 to 7 days after the election. It is now November 16th. This is a scam."
I will be the greatest president that God ever created.